Welcome back, everyone. Today is Sunday, March 1st, 2026, and we are absolutely thrilled to have you joining us for another exploration. I'll kick things off by introducing myself to you. I'm Sherry, your guide to making sense of the noise and finding the signal in a very crowded world of information.
And I'm McQueen, here to help connect those dots, dig into the structural why behind the headlines, and hopefully give you a competitive edge with this knowledge.
Before we even touch today's materials, we just have to send a massive heartfelt thank you to all of you who tuned in to our previous deep dive discussing Canada health.
Yeah, the engagement was incredible.
It really was. The comments, the incredibly thoughtful questions you all brought to the table, it was genuinely amazing to read through. Please keep that energy going. Comment, like, and share this deep dive so others can benefit from these discussions.
Absolutely. The more you share, the more we can keep unpacking these crucial topics together.
Exactly. And for those of you who might be new to our community, let's quickly outline our mission. The purpose of this deep dive is to explore important community issues and global happenings. We take a very tall stack of sources, articles, policy notes, expert analysis, economic data, and we break it all down to uncover the most vital insights.
We basically do the heavy lifting, synthesizing that really complex bureaucratic language so you can walk away with a clear, actionable understanding of what's actually going on.
We also love hearing directly from you. In our last edition, we asked you to drop comments if you wanted us to discuss Canada immigration and opportunities. Well, you spoke, and we listened.
Based on your overwhelming suggestions, our mission today is unpacking one of the most requested, complex, and genuinely fascinating topics right now. We're looking at the severe tightening of Canada's express entry system.
It is a massive shift. But before we get into the weeds of that, please drop a comment right now specifying exactly what part of immigration you want us to cover in our next deep dive.
Yeah. Are you interested in student visas, family sponsorship, corporate transfers? Just let us know.
Also, a quick announcement for the entrepreneurs out there. If you are a business owner and you want to advertise your products right here on Deep Dive, you should reach out by sending a detailed message to deepdive247@gmail.com. We would love to partner with you.
Definitely. Okay, let's get into the research.
Let's do it. So we are looking at a stack of sources today that detail some really fundamental changes to how Canada selects its economic immigrants. But to understand the magnitude of this shift, we need to establish a baseline, right? Like Express Entry 101.
Right, for anyone listening who isn't deep in the immigration trenches.
Exactly. So Express Entry is the federal system Canada uses to manage three major immigration programs. You've got the Federal Skilled Worker Program, the Canadian Experience Class, and the Federal Skilled Trades Program. Candidates basically put their profiles into a massive digital pool, and they get ranked using something called the Comprehensive Ranking System, or CRS.
Think of the CRS as this giant, incredibly stressful SAT score for your entire life and career.
That is a great way to put it.
Historically, the philosophy behind that scoring system was built entirely on theoretical human capital. It was a points-driven matrix. You earned a score based on your global education, your English or French language proficiency, your age, and your foreign work experience.
So if you had a master's degree from your home country, you were under 30, and had 3 years of professional experience abroad, you look fantastic on paper.
You did. You scored high,
Yeah.
and the algorithm automatically sent you an invitation to apply for permanent residency. It was very straightforward.
But the analysis we are reviewing today indicates that era is essentially over. The system is no longer just rewarding people who win that global beauty pageant of theoretical resumes.
No. The new gatekeeper, the absolute core focus of the Canadian system now, is verified Canadian integration.
Which is a huge structural pivot.
It is profound. It's much deeper than just watching those CRS cutoff scores tick up or down every few weeks. The government has made a highly calculated pivot towards centralized control over economic selection.
Because from their perspective outlined in the sources, foreign work experience is just simply too difficult to authenticate at scale.
Exactly. Relying on PDF reference letters from companies halfway across the globe, it just opens the door to massive inconsistencies and, frankly, systemic credential inflation.
I hear that, but let me play the skeptic for a second for the listener. Isn't a brilliant software engineer working in Berlin just as valuable to the Canadian economy as a software engineer already working in Toronto? Why is the government suddenly penalizing the global talent pool to favor the domestic one? What does Canadian experience actually offer that foreign experience doesn't?
It comes down to one word: traceability.
Traceability.
Right. When someone is working inside Canada, their entire economic existence is tracked. There is direct CRA traceability, that's the Canada Revenue Agency.
So the government doesn't have to guess if you actually held a senior management role.
They don't guess at all. They can just look at your domestic tax filings. There are centralized payroll records, T4 tax verification, and direct employer accountability. It takes the guesswork completely out of the equation and makes fraud detection infinitely easier from a regulatory standpoint.
So, to frame this clearly for the listener, Express Entry has shifted away from who looks like a great hypothetical asset globally and moved strictly to who has proven undeniable economic participation right here, right now.
Yes.
If your integration into the workforce cannot be digitally verified by Canadian tax and payroll systems, your path just got a lot steeper.
Which brings us to a secondary, equally massive structural change outlined in the data: the shift from algorithmic ranking to policy-driven selection.
This is where the power dynamics completely flip. In the past, Express Entry draws were broad. They were these all-program draws.
Right, the computer system basically just scanned the pool, found the top 5,000 highest scores regardless of what those people actually did for a living, and sent out invitations.
But now our sources show the Immigration Department is utilizing category-based draws. They are targeting very specific occupations and sectors like healthcare, trades, or STEM based on immediate ministerial direction.
And we really need to consider the loss of predictability for the applicant here. A few years ago, candidates could look at the historical data, analyze the trends, and forecast their permanent residency outcomes with a reasonable degree of certainty.
If you had a score of 480, you could sleep well at night knowing you were safe.
Today, a high CRS score no longer guarantees anything. You might have an incredibly high score, but if your specific occupation doesn't align with the government's priorities that particular month, you are left stranded in the pool.
If you're listening to this and you're in the Express Entry pool right now, I know this sounds incredibly daunting. The rules of the game are changing while you're playing it. The system has moved from a cold, predictable mathematical ranking to a highly subjective, policy-driven selection process.
The minister has vast discretion now. The candidate pool still exists, but the government's control over who actually gets pulled from that pool is vastly tighter.
So this unpredictability, it drastically increases government flexibility, right? But it heavily reduces the leverage of the applicant.
Exactly. CRS cutoffs swing wildly, draw types shift, target categories change rapidly. It all benefits the regulators.
Let's bring this home for the business owners listening to us right now. Specifically, the small and medium enterprise, or SME owners. I'm talking about the mom and pop tech startups, the local construction firms, the regional healthcare clinic.
The backbone of the economy.
Exactly. If you are running a business in Canada, you likely rely on foreign talent, and you want to eventually transition those workers to permanent residency to keep them around. This tightening affects you directly, and frankly, it sounds like a nightmare for smaller operations.
It raises a very uncomfortable question for those small business owners. Do you view your HR department as a core part of your immigration strategy?
Because according to the data we are parsing, you absolutely must.
You have to. A company's human resources documentation now directly determines a worker's immigration success. Sponsoring a worker is no longer just a casual recruitment issue. It is a rigid regulatory strategy.
Let's put this in the real world with a hypothetical scenario based on these new rules. Imagine you own a mid-sized tech startup in Vancouver. You hired a brilliant data analyst from Brazil 2 years ago on a temporary work visa. In the old system, you just wait for her high global score to get her permanent residency.
But today, the government wants to see perfect alignment. The sources highlight the absolute importance of NOC codes. That's the National Occupational Classification System.
Think of the NOC as the government's giant, incredibly pedantic dictionary of every job in the country, detailing exactly what duties belong to what title.
Right. And if your company's internal job description for that data analyst doesn't perfectly match the specific duties listed in the federal NOC code dictionary, you have a massive problem.
So if you inflated her title to Director of Analytics just to make her feel valued, but her daily duties are actually junior level.
Her entire Express Entry profile will collapse upon review. The government will see a mismatch between the declared NOC code and the verified duties.
And what happens when that profile collapses? It's not just a rejection letter. The downstream effect is a massive retention risk for the business. Your startup loses its boss data analyst simply because your internal paperwork wasn't perfectly synchronized with federal definitions.
That worker's visa expires, they have to leave the country, and you're left scrambling to replace institutional knowledge.
To prevent that, the sources say employers need to implement strict documentation discipline. We have to frame this correctly for the business owners listening. This is no longer just paperwork that gets shoved into a digital folder and forgotten.
No, this is essential compliance infrastructure.
Let's detail exactly what employers need to tighten internally based on the source. First, as we mentioned, precise NOC alignment. You need highly detailed job descriptions that match exactly what the employee does every single day without exaggeration.
Next, you need clear proof of hours worked and consistent wage records. We are talking about T4 slips, which are basically the official financial report cards you send to the government at the end of the year.
And records of employment, or ROEs, which are the official tracking sheets of exactly how many hours someone worked and why they might have stopped working. All of these documents must tell the exact same story.
If a worker claims they worked 40 hours a week for 2 years, but the T4 tax slip shows an income that suggests they only work 20 hours a week at minimum wage, the system flags it immediately. The days of casual record keeping for foreign workers are completely over.
Which leads us right into the enforcement threat. Because Canada isn't just asking nicely for better paperwork, they have built the digital infrastructure to demand it. The integration between the Canada Revenue Agency and the Immigration Department is stronger than it has ever been in history.
Canadian work history is incredibly easy to audit now because these massive federal databases are talking to each other in real time.
And the consequences of an audit uncovering discrepancies are severe, aren't they?
Devastatingly severe. Because it is so much easier to cross-reference data now, things like inflated job duties, fake supervisory roles, or inconsistent reference letters are caught almost automatically. And catching these discrepancies doesn't just result in a polite refusal.
It leads directly to misrepresentation findings. And a misrepresentation finding is basically the nuclear option in immigration law. What does that actually mean for the applicant?
It carries a severe 5-year ban from entering Canada. The applicant is barred, and the employer is left with a sudden, unfillable vacancy and a potential audit of their entire foreign workforce.
Wow.
Yeah, express entry tightening fundamentally increases the likelihood of these bans because the level of scrutiny on Canadian records is so intensely magnified.
So naturally, if the federal system is basically acting like a fortress right now, I'd imagine people are desperately looking for a back door. A lot of applicants and employers turn to the provincial nominee programs, or PNPs.
Right.
For those who don't know, getting a provincial nomination adds a whopping 600 points to an applicant's CRS score. Historically, that has been viewed as a golden ticket. It virtually guarantees the federal government will invite you to apply. But are PNPs still the easy workaround they used to be?
We really need to dispel the illusion that PNPs are a backdoor right now. The sources make it abundantly clear that provincial nominee programs are tightening right alongside the federal system.
They are fully integrated into this new, rigorous control framework.
The provinces see what the federal government is doing, and they are mirroring that exact level of scrutiny. The provinces are demanding their own heavy proof before they hand out those 600 points.
They want extensive employer justification. They want to see detailed recruitment efforts, meaning you have to prove, with documentation, that you aggressively tried to hire a Canadian citizen or permanent resident for the role first and failed.
They demand labor market proof, and they will dig deep into employers' past compliance history. It is a highly rigorous, intensely bureaucratic process now, not a shortcut.
Let's take a moment to step back and look at the broader landscape. We've detailed the mechanics, the shift to verifiable Canadian experience, the unpredictable category draws, the intense documentation demands, the PNP tightening. But the big question for the listener is, why is Canada implementing all of these restrictive measures at this exact moment in time?
The sources outline 4 main pillars driving this overarching policy shift. Let's walk through them.
Okay, where does this start?
It starts with fraud reduction. As we've discussed at length, relying on centralized, verifiable domestic data makes it exponentially harder to fake work experience or inflate credentials. When the system relies on tax records rather than foreign paper certificates, systemic fraud drops dramatically.
That makes perfect sense. And then the second pillar is labor market alignment. By utilizing those targeted category-based draws, the government isn't just taking whoever happens to have a high general score. They can use a scalpel to pick the exact workers the economy is begging for, like carpenters, nurses, or agricultural technicians.
Even if those specific workers wouldn't have won the old points competition.
Right.
However, building on that, the third pillar is integration performance metrics. The government wants guaranteed success.
Hmm.
By requiring verifiable Canadian experience, they ensure that the people being granted permanent residency are already successfully participating in the economy, paying taxes, and contributing to society.
It removes the risk of a highly educated immigrant arriving and failing to find a job in their field.
Exactly. And that leads us to the fourth pillar, which is perhaps the most visible one right now. Political optics and the narrative of controlled immigration.
Now, a strict impartiality note for our listeners here. We are entirely neutral on this. We aren't here to endorse political views, validate the narrative, or champion any specific side. Our job is simply to impartially report on the context provided in our source material. And that context explains that governments across the country are under immense public pressure regarding severe housing shortages, healthcare system strain, and overall infrastructure capacity.
That political context is vital to understanding the policy. The government is utilizing this centralized, highly visible selection system to manage public perception. By tightening the criteria, conducting high-profile audits, and focusing on specific needed categories, they can essentially broadcast to the public. We aren't reducing immigration, we are refining it.
It allows them to maintain narrative control while attempting to address those very real domestic political pressures.
Which brings us to the ultimate pattern we are seeing here. If you look at express entry tightening, the increased documentation scrutiny, the severe penalties for misrepresentation, the employer compliance inspections, and the digital cross-verification systems, they all point in one unified direction.
Canada is not closing its doors to immigration, not at all, but Canada is aggressively centralizing control over it.
Selection, verification, and enforcement. All three of those pillars are strengthening simultaneously. It's a cohesive shift toward total regulatory oversight.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, we need to leave you with some final, highly practical advice, especially for the SME owners, HR professionals, and the applicants listening today. The primary directive moving forward is this: you must operate as if every single file, every single application will be comprehensively audited.
Do not leave anything to chance. Audit your internal HR documentation today. Do not wait until an employee's application is submitted to the government.
Go through your files right now. Ensure every job description aligns perfectly with the correct federal NOC code dictionary. Throw out generic one-paragraph reference letters. They simply do not cut it anymore. Maintain flawless, consistent payroll records that perfectly match the declared work hours.
Prepare your business for compliance inspections before they happen. And honestly, work with experienced immigration counsel. This landscape is far too complex and the penalties are far too severe to navigate on a hunch.
The so-what summary of all this data is quite stark. Understanding this data-driven, highly enforceable shift is literally the difference between successfully accessing the global talent you need to grow your business and facing devastating workforce instability or severe application refusals. Immigration is no longer just a hiring process. It is a serious, uncompromising regulatory strategy.
It really is.
And that brings us to the end of the hard facts from our sources today. But before we sign off, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over on your own, something that builds on everything we've just discussed.
Yeah, think about this. If an immigration system relies solely on the perfect, verifiable digital paper trail of your past, does it leave any room for the unquantifiable potential and sheer drive that built the country in the first place?
That is a deeply fascinating question to ponder as we watch these policies unfold. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us for this deep dive. As always, please hit that like button, share this with anyone who needs to hear it, and comment down below with the specific immigration topics you want us to tackle next.
And remember, if you want to advertise your business or products on Deep Dive, email us directly at deepdive247@gmail.com.
Until next time, stay informed, stay compliant, and stay strategic.